Welcome, everybody. This is Irish Illustrated Insider. It's Virginia week. Notre Dame playing their 10th game of the season as they host the Cavaliers on senior day. Notre Dame's a 22.5 point favorite, over under 50.5. Kind of a tough game to pick against the spread, I think. But we talked to Marcus Freeman today and asked him a little bit about what's going to happen on the interior defensive line with Howard Cross out. Cross will at least miss this game against Virginia. And Tim, I'll throw it to you to explain what Marcus Freeman said about the rotation at defensive tackle and nose tackle.
Yeah, not too big of a surprise. Gabriel Rubio can play both. He's listed at three technique most of the year, but he told us the last time we talked to him, which was spring, probably, right? I don't think we got a hold of him. Gosh, was it even spring? Maybe it's been a year. But
Yeah.
he said I normally play nose tackle no matter where I'm listed. So he can play nose tackle and three technique. He'll back up, I think, Mills and Heinisch at both. And when they need some help, Mookum will help at DT and Sevillano will help at nose tackle. And hopefully those guys both get 15 fourth quarter snaps.
Be a good weekend for it. I mean, it's not that Florida State and Virginia have similar willingness to continue to play the sport of college football vibes about them, but this is a game where at least the second half of the fourth quarter you would like to see Mookum, Sevillano, and go a little bit deeper. And that's if they got a lot of run last week, and they should get a little bit less this week. But that's, as Marcus Freeman said, that's a valuable commodity to have any time of the season.
And if those guys can prove themselves again against another ACC opponent this week, you feel even good about ensuring that Howard Cross takes all the necessary time before attempting to come back potentially against USC. But yeah, Rubio, I thought TP made a good point. He had a really good game last week. He was really active, looked to be moving the best he's moved all season long. Injury or otherwise, it just looked like he was finally back into the shape he displayed early last season when he was such a valuable member of that D-line rotation.
Yeah, I really liked his maneuverability. He obviously is in position to move into the starting lineup next year. I don't think he only has 1 year of eligibility remaining, which I think is a bit of a shame. He's had difficulty staying healthy, but he's been good. He has been active. He was very I said light on his feet, and Marcus Freeman said they weren't going to move him to Viper anytime soon. Not that I was suggesting that, but for a big guy in the middle, he is pretty active. Uh, Marcus Freeman was asked about Anthony Colandrea, the quarterback for Virginia, and I call him a spunky little guy, and somebody on our message board laughed at that. He's 6 foot tall, very confident kid, really quick off on the keeper on the read option. He can throw it around a little bit. But if you guys have anybody that's out there that has seen him, he gives him a little bit of a spark. He has Malachi Fields as a really good 6'4", 220-pound receiver. And so he'll get his. He'll have his moments where he's going to snap off a run. He can throw the ball around a little bit. He makes too many bad decisions in taking sacks. I thought, okay, well, the offensive line's bad. The offensive line isn't bad. It's a veteran offensive line that is blocking way better than it did last year. But Calandrea is the guy that really gives them a spark offensively.
Tim, I do prefer spunky little guy compared to when you called Daniel Jones tall, and he ended up being a first round draft pick and beat Notre Dame. So that's good because tall worked that day against Notre Dame. But no, I agree. That's a good description. I think Notre Dame will have some success against the spunky little guy after the first drive. I asked Marcus Freeman. I guess we're just not going to get real answers on Thursday press conferences anymore. How you get a team out of script? Because Al Gold admitted, we asked him, why do they look like the 2007 Patriots in the first drive and like Florida State the rest of the way? We've asked him this previous times, and he's like, teams tend to stay on script to those first drives. If they're on script, you're in trouble. And I think it's a good question from our message board. Why are they able to stay on script against one of the best defenses of the country, but not against other defenses? Obviously, this is nitpicking. You want the way Notre Dame handles it. Good job on your field goal or touchdown. Now you're not going to score the rest of the game. But I'm just curious about how you can get teams off script, because you'd think Al Gold and Marcus Freeman would have a way to do it. And I'm that's what I want to see if Virginia is going to stay close in this one. I think Virginia has to go down and pull a Florida State, only go into the end zone and score a touchdown. And if they don't, I think they're going to get run out of the building like the last 5 teams that came in here on senior day.
Yeah, and I like the Virginia brain trust on the offensive side of the ball, including head coach Tony Elliott. Obviously, he proved himself as Clemson's offensive coordinator. Des Kitchings is their offensive coordinator. He's been in the NFL. He coordinated some offenses at NC State as well. And then Taylor Lamb, the quarterback's coach, a really, really bright young coach, played quarterback at for App State and some of their really good teams. But to your point about Colandrea needing to be spunky or being spunky, well, he has to be spunky because Virginia's given up. They're 127th in the nation in sacks allowed. The poor guy's been sacked more than 30 times this year, and I expect that kind of success to continue this weekend for the Irish defense.
Yeah, there's just not a lot that I could see Virginia having consistent success in the pass game against Notre Dame. It's just not there. They can't protect, and Notre Dame's pass defense is number 2 in the country, pass efficiency. I'm interested to see Jonas Sanker, like their safety.
Yeah.
I had Eric McLean on my other podcast this week, and he said he's like the point was like he's not Kyle Hamilton, so like I'm not trying to say that, but in terms of how they use him, it is a little bit similar. And he thinks like he's a couple steps away from that, but just a talented, creative player at the back of their defense that is probably a future pro.
He's a good player. He makes a lot of plays. It is pronounced Jonas. The spelling is with a J, but it is pronounced Jonas. He's a good football player. Like we always talk about senior day and the emotions, and Holtz always used to say it's hard to play well on senior day when your players' eyes are filled with tears. And and there were times where Notre Dame did struggle actually under Holtz on senior day. It has not been happening to Notre Dame in recent years at all. Here, in 2018, they beat Florida State by 29. 2019, BC by 33. Syracuse by 24, Georgia Tech by 55, shutout, BC by 44, shutout, and then Wake Forest last year by 38. The last time they struggled,
it's 271 to 48.
Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable. The last time they struggled on senior day was 2017 against Navy. They only won by 7, and it was a 7-6 Navy team. So
But they struggled that one because their season ended 6 days prior at Miami.
Yeah, that was a struggling Notre Dame.
That was they would have lost. They could have struggled against Tennessee State that day because it was that was really.
I was a little foggy. I don't remember those details very well then. But so Notre Dame has not struggled at home at all. And Notre Dame is I mean they're I think they're obviously they're playing their best football right now, and I think they'll hit their mark. But Virginia, I will disagree with John and Pete on this. That I don't see it as much as their offensive line caving as Colandrea holds on to the ball too damn long and gets sacked a lot, or he'll roll to his right and instead of throwing it out of bounds, he runs out of bounds for a sack. He's done that an awful lot. So somewhere I think in between those two things is reality. And they have run the football way better than they did last year. Kobe Pace is your power back. Xavier Brown is your scat back, and then you have Colandrea with the ability to run it. So look, these are all great scenarios, except when you run into the Notre Dame defense over the course of 4 quarters.
I think you brought up one
as well.
I think you brought up one important scenario. I mean, I think Notre Dame's going to kill Virginia, but the way they might not is they have 2 running backs and a power back included. And if you're going to get Notre Dame, even with Howard Cross, it's been possessing the football and running right at them. If they can be patient enough to do that and call a good game around it, you can shorten the game and give Notre Dame trouble. And then if Notre Dame goes right down the field and gets a tipped pass interception instead of a Riley Leonard rushing touchdown, the games are closer. But you have to be very patient. And I still think, along with that patience, when you take a shot, that shot has to score against Notre Dame. Because if your shot goes for 45 yards and it's 1st and 10 at the 15, you're getting a field goal.
There have been, I've had fun with numbers this week with Virginia because Tony Elliott is 11-20. Of their 20 losses, 9 have been by 1 score, but 10 have been by 17 or more. There's nothing in between. They either play you tough or they get hammered. And the teams that they've played tough, they were +7, +3, +4, along those lines. They were hammered by North Carolina and Clemson this year, but they're feeling good about themselves. They went to Pittsburgh. They knocked out Eli Holston in the second quarter, I believe it was. And that Yarnell kid is still there at quarterback. The kid that played against, is that the same kid that played against Notre Dame in 2020?
Yeah, guys are still here.
I think so.
I think it is. He hasn't improved.
Yeah, you beat me to it.
He hasn't improved.
They're older. Who cares? Yeah.
But that's Pittsburgh. That's for next. He'll probably be around next year when Notre Dame goes to Pittsburgh and plays him in 2025. But I don't know. I have fun digging into the opponent. I think this is a little bit more interesting opponent than some others. But again, ultimately, all these things that you say about an offensive team after that first drive or after about 7 minutes of the first quarter, Notre Dame's defense usually takes over. And I do think that Notre Dame's offense can have success during the football. I see good individual players on that side of the ball. We have some questions about, how did they stop Pittsburgh and Louisville if their defense is so bad? We'll address that in the second segment. Guys, what else from Marcus Freeman? He was asked about Benjamin Morrison. He's coming along well in his recovery. No brace. I don't know exactly what kind of brace he was wearing on his hip, but so he's moving around, coaching the DBs. He's in the DBs room trying to help out, and man, he's got some good young proteges there following him.
Yeah, it's similar to maybe Kyle Hamilton, second Kyle Hamilton reference here, but when he was out in 2020, although I guess maybe coaching up DJ Brown is a little different than Leonard Moore at your position. But yeah, I think the fact that he's still around and involved in captains meetings, it's what you would expect, but it's worth noting at the same time, considering where his football career is going to take him after this season, most likely.
For me, the only other really interesting thing I thought from Marcus's Zoom today was Matt Freeman asked him a good question about the recruiting calendar and the importance of last weekend. And we've seen a couple of commitments tick out of last weekend for Notre Dame's recruiting efforts. It was their one night game at home of the year, their signature recruiting weekend for home of the year. Pretty much everybody the Irish had on campus last weekend was or is considered a take moving forward. And yeah, the recruiting calendar is moved up. And Lane Kiffin sounded off on this Wednesday on the SEC coaches teleconference that I was participating in. And you've got signing day coming up, early signing day, December 4th through the 6th. And then you've got the portal December 9th through the 28th, or as Lane Kiffin referred to it, free agency in the middle of the season. Imagine if the NBA or the NFL had free agency in season. He said, so it's a really screwed up system. We're going to try to take advantage of it as the best we can while it's this really screwed up. And he's right. So yeah, it's more roster management than ever before. People like Chad Bowden or Caleb Davis or Carter Armon or whomever behind the scenes for Notre Dame are more important than ever before, because you're trying to figure out who you're taking those first 3 days, how many spots you truly have for first year players coming from the high school ranks. What might your attrition look like later in the month? And T.O., you made me look this up, and we might have referenced it recently. Important to note, if you make the playoffs or a bowl game, your guys have 5 days from the conclusion of that game to then enter the transfer portal. So if Notre Dame hosts or makes the playoffs and plays in that 2021 weekend of December and then plays again around the 29th or whatever that is. Let me look at the schedule. Yeah, December 31st or January 1st. Then if they keep going, you wouldn't know who was potentially leaving Notre Dame until January 15th if they make it all the way to the semifinals, or not until January 25th if they were to make it to the CFP championship game.
Speaking of the players or the recruits that were in town visiting for Florida State and Notre Dame, I'm not sure what the timing of this was earlier in the week, but Nolan James, the little running back, the little spunky running back who is
he's a little more spunky.
He's a tough running back. He's of course in the class of 2025. Daniel Anderson was removed from that commitment list. He'd been on that commitment list for quite some time. Nolan James replaces him, and then Thomas Davis Jr., class of 2026 linebacker, verbally committed Notre Dame. Looks like I need to do a film review on him. Looks like a pure Mike linebacker, very physical, very hard hitting kid. So a couple, and there will be some other names popping up on Notre Dame's side coming out of the recruiting weekend. What did I want to? Is there anything else, guys, from Marcus Freeman? Because I wanted to mention. I think I already did, actually. Yeah, just the up and down nature of Virginia. When they're good, they're capable. But again, Notre Dame's defense will have an answer for Anthony Calandre over the course of 4 quarters. Go Wang and ESQ Clothing have shared a preview of their secret Black Friday sale exclusive to Irish Illustrated. ESQ will match percentage-wise whatever Notre Dame scores against Army on November 23rd using code Irish Illustrated. The sale will go live Sunday, the 24th, for 1 week, so be prepared to get gifting. Valid on online items only, not valid for gift cards. Coming up, segment 2, burning up the boards.
If you're coming to a game this season, you have to check out Game Day Your Way, Notre Dame's tailgate service provider. Game Day offers everything you need, including tailgate gear, catering, and even beverage delivery right to your spot. And their Irish Express transportation from Chicago allows you to tailgate while you travel to their all-inclusive party zone in South Bend. Let Game Day deal with all the hassle so you can focus on the fun. For tailgates, tickets, transportation, and more, visit GameDayYourWay.com.
Welcome back to segment 2, burning up the boards. Our first question, one dear to our traveling hearts, from Elm City Domer. What would be John Bryce's choice for Notre Dame's best destinations for a 2 playoff game set from a college football game day experience perspective?
Well, I love the question, and I love travel, so I'm happy to answer it. Unfortunately, there's no way that Notre Dame can get 2 games, either one on its campus and one on someone else's campus. The most it can do with the setup is to either host or play at someone and then have a neutral site. But and maybe that was realized in the question, and I'm just stupid. But I would like to see if the Irish don't get to host, then I think Texas or Alabama at night would be really good environments. Whether Notre Dame plays a Friday night game at home or has a Saturday game, home or away, I hope that the Irish are in one of the night slots. So those, I mean, look, I've been to a couple of hundred Tennessee games through the years, covered a couple of hundred Tennessee games. Neyland Stadium is really cool right there on the banks of the Tennessee River. Tons of great food in that town. Obviously, I have a lot of friends and family in that area. But I just think Alabama is really good at night. Texas is an impressive area. And then when you start looking at where the games go from there, I just think you don't want to be in the Peach Bowl just because I think well, first of all, Notre Dame already played in that stadium this year. Notre Dame already played in that stadium this year. It's so sterile around the venue that I don't think Atlanta would move the needle for Notre Dame fans, but I think they would rally behind, obviously, an appearance in the Fiesta Bowl or the Rose or the Sugar Bowl. So that's it for me.
Mercedes-Benz is not like some of the newer stadiums we've been to, Vegas, and I guess Arlington's not that new anymore, but not quite like that. Tennessee, I mean, any of those that you said, John, I mean, good Lord, those would be
Tennessee's my choice.
Big time challenges for Notre Dame.
Tennessee's my choice always in this situation. If you're talking about, like, I'm going to Austin, Texas would be great, but Tennessee is my pick for the stadium and game day atmosphere for fans. Pete and I have the same number 2 for round 2. It's pretty obvious we want to go to the Fiesta Bowl again and Camelback in. Tim Priester will try to land his exact same hotel room against all odds.
For the 3rd time.
Yeah, and I want to throw in, if you actually want the best atmosphere for a wild, insane scene this particular year, it is Indiana. They will lose their minds in that stadium playing Notre Dame.
Yeah, that would be wild. Texas would be my first choice. But my real first choice is not Penn State, anywhere but Penn State.
Yes. Yeah.
I feel more strongly about my last place choice than any of my first place options. And for the first time, maybe ever, and could be the only time, I would not have the Camelback Inn and the Fiesta Bowl #1. I would have the Rose Bowl.
I've never been to the Rose Bowl, so I guess that would be
And
mine too.
also, like Mercedes-Benz would be just fine on January 20th. I feel like you'd feel
Right.
much differently about it than you did against Georgia Tech.
I would say, yeah, the Rose Bowl for me would be priority one if Notre Dame advanced. I've covered a game at the Rose Bowl. I have not covered the Rose Bowl, and the reason I didn't include Ole Miss higher up in the ranking is it's an awesome game day atmosphere, but the logistics in and out of there are such trash, and then media parking is so far away that you have to take either a golf cart or a tiny little school bus to
Yeah.
get shuttled to the stadium. I want zero parts of that as well. So, Ole Miss atmosphere, I would relish. I would relish the atmosphere at Penn State. I want crap to do with the logistics for either of those.
I want to welcome John Bryce officially to the Irish Illustrated podcast team because he is now telling people he doesn't want to go to Ole Miss because the media has a long ride. You now complain just like me, Pete, and Tim have for our entire lives about games because everybody listening just went, I don't care what your ride is to the game.
Yeah.
But
Well, but my point also is
Virginia Tech,
media,
terrible.
it's not just the media ride to the stadium from media parking. Oxford is not really easy to get to. So you're either flying into Memphis and driving down, or you're maybe flying into Jackson and driving from there. It's just not as aesthetically wonderful as it is. And I know plenty of our listeners would love to spend some time in the Grove.
Yeah, I heard the aesthetics actually are just fine.
I said the aesthetics are great.
Yeah, just want to make sure.
Yeah, I don't know how many people have said, can you imagine a home game in Notre Dame Stadium in December, which would be cold? Can you imagine a game in December at Penn State?
Oh.
Wind-swept Penn
That
State?
is a home field advantage right
Oh
there.
my gosh. Oh my goodness. And Ole Miss, I hadn't even really considered that. I've only been on that campus once before, and I played a doubleheader there. I was not in the football stadium. I played a doubleheader at Ole Miss. But yeah, those would be, and that is one of the great things about this 12-team format is that you can get into some stadiums, especially when you talk about SEC, because Notre Dame doesn't play SEC teams a whole bunch. You get in some of those stadiums that you haven't been in before,
Any
or
truth
not
to the
very
rumor?
often.
Any truth to the rumor, Priester? You had 3 errors by looking into the stands when you were at Ole Miss as a collegiate?
No, but the Rebels kicked the Irish's ass. I know that.
Probably if I had my pick of picks, and we already went over this on yesterday's podcast, so I don't think it could happen. But at BYU would be pretty freaking awesome.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
as picturesque. Lavelle Edwards Stadium is as picturesque as it gets.
Oh, it's
really nice
fantastic.
facilities.
It's
Dry
that
County,
is.
in case it happens, everybody.
Oh yeah,
Dry
yeah,
County.
that's true. Yeah, that is true.
Just pointing it out.
2 questions. One from CMU Pens fan. What weakness does the Virginia defense have that you fully expect Mike Denbrock to try to exploit? And then tied in with that from Kay Beasley, what do you see that the UVA defense that allowed them to play Louisville and Pitt well, but got gashed by Clemson and North Carolina?
I have a good answer for part 2. They missed a lot of tackles. They missed a lot of tackles in their losses. In fact, they missed 57 tackles in their 3-game losing streak, and they only missed 33 tackles in the 3 wins around it against Power 4 teams. And I want to introduce this because it's a fun stat for Notre Dame fans. These are the missed tackles forced by the 3 best offensive players on every contending team, okay? Tennessee 62, you know where some of that comes from. Penn State 46, Miami 42, IU 45, Ole Miss 55, Texas 49. All these things are pretty similar, right? Ohio State 62, we're back up there. Oregon 72, pretty good. 95, Notre Dame. 95 missed tackles forced by the top 3 players, compared to the closest is Oregon at 72 among contenders.
I would think Oregon would be number 1. Wow, that's amazing.
They are going to have trouble tackling Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love.
And here's another thing that to answer those questions, what I think that Denbrock and the Irish can take advantage of is Virginia is absolutely dreadful with red zone defense. They're among the worst teams in the country in red zone defense. They allow scores about 92% of the time. They played the same number of games as Notre Dame and have maybe allowed 35 red zone trips and given up more touchdowns than field goals within that metric, but they give up scores about 92% of the time. As to why maybe Virginia played Louisville as close as it did, it was a home game for the Cavs. It was earlier in the season, and Louisville was finding itself right then because it had been handled in back-to-back weeks by Notre Dame on the road and at home by SMU. SMU obviously atop the ACC standings alongside Miami, and then Notre Dame also deep in the college football playoffs rankings and prepared to host a playoff game as long as it continues to handle business. So that's what I look at and see.
Yeah, JB, we're looking at the same notes because that's exactly what I was going to say about Louisville having just played Notre Dame and SMU. And a lot of times we don't consider that, right? You're only looking at
Yeah.
the two teams matching up. Well, what just happened before that? They just had to play Notre Dame and SMU, and then had to travel to Virginia and probably weren't up for it. I know that there was a 35-25 time of possession difference. Louisville still ran for 177 yards that day, but sometimes we don't. We look at some other. There's so many factors to consider when you're matching two teams up, and I think that I definitely agree with you, John. I think that played a role in it. Plus, Pittsburgh, again, as we said at the top of the show, they lost their quarterback. The Trey McDonald, I believe, the guy that's called for targeting, it happened in the first half, so he was out the second half, and we'll be back for the Notre Dame game. But Virginia's decent, man. I mean, they're decent. They're capable of being decent. I just don't know that this is the time for them to rise up and come up with a big upset.
Tim, I think Virginia got caught Notre Dame at the wrong time. I was on their podcast yesterday with Jackie at 24/7, Wahoo 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
You could have gotten Virginia could have gotten Notre Dame in mid-September the way they were playing. If that was the Miami game or the Louisville game, I just think that Notre Dame the offense is look, they had 2 inefficient drives in a row and they scored 45 offensive points last week. It's just the offense is much different than it used to be.
Yeah, I think Virginia would be, if they had a 6-6 season, that'd be fantastic for them, considering where the program has been. The Louisville game, like you said, is kind of an outlier based on their opponents, and even the Pittsburgh game, the quarterback injury and what happened the week before to Pittsburgh. They got destroyed at SMU, their first loss of the season. Yeah. So they're spiraling a little bit. So yeah, but I agree with them. If this was like a September game, comparable to like Vanderbilt in 18, or like or even Virginia in 15. There's been some weird September performances. There are not really weird November performances anymore against middle of the road teams or worse.
Not in Notre Dame home finales, that's for sure.
No, in Notre Dame, I made this point in the prediction for tomorrow. When you look at Notre Dame's body of work, I would contend Notre Dame has played 34 quarters of winning football, and it's had 2 really craptastic quarters in the second half against Northern Illinois. But 36 quarters into the season, and I would say Notre Dame has been just fine in 34 to 36.
Notre Dame has, if you add the last 4 games up, they were favored, of course, in all 4 by a total of 67 points, and Notre Dame covered that by 78 points. Does that make any sense? They were 70. I mean, they've just absolutely destroyed teams, obviously. Moving on to Coach Aguilar, do you think the college football playoff bias towards the SEC and Big Ten is obviously a bit of placation to ensure they don't take their ball and create their own playoff structure? It's a little bit of editorializing there.
Just a bit, huh? Well, those 2 leagues are the best leagues. They have the most talent, the most NFL draft picks. They win the most games. They win the most national championships, the SEC in particular. So I don't think there's a bias other than towards good football teams, which is the whole point of the rankings in the first
Should there be 4 Big Ten teams in the top 5 right now?
That's weird.
But I mean, there should be 4 in the top 12.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, agreed. So, sure.
At that point, it doesn't make too. Like, I don't understand why Penn State's ranked where they're ranked.
Thank you.
Texas is overvalued at number 3, but it's not like they should be 17 and we should slide SMU in there. So yeah, I don't. I
Oh,
guess
but
I'm
SMU
not
should
quite
be in
on
the
the
top.
bias train here.
I'm pounding my fist for SMU should be in the top 12. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of it doesn't yet matter. A lot of it, I still think, to Pete's point, there would be four teams from the Big Ten in the top 12 that doesn't, they still can only get one bye.
Yeah.
I think Texas, as we discussed, is valued where it is right now because it's in a three-way tie atop the SEC rankings, and there's going to be an SEC team no worse than third in the final playoff shufflings. If Tennessee somehow finds a way to beat Georgia this weekend, I think it eliminates Georgia from the playoffs, and you'll see Tennessee as the top ranked number 3 seed next week in the polls.
Question from Packy P. Notre Dame has had issues against the run. Which of the remaining 3 games is most concerning, especially without Cross? And Packy P says, in his opinion, it will be USC.
A great question. I'm still going to lean towards Army because they will be patient enough to use 4 downs to gain 10.5 yards as needed. It's a great point with USC though, because they can keep you off balance and hit you a lot on 2nd and 10 with a 7-yard gash, and all of a sudden they're back on schedule. I'm going to stick with Army without with Howard Cross. No, without Howard Cross, I'll say Army due to their adherence to not caring about scoring after 20 play drives they have. It's ridiculous. It's amazing. Did you see that drive on Twitter broken down so you could watch it? Their 21 play drive or whatever it was. It takes 2 minutes to watch, and when it's broken down into like 3-second clips, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's 21 plays, 13 minutes. My colleague Zach Barnett wrote a really good story about it on Football Scoop
It's
earlier
amazing.
this week. I mean, yeah,
It's
it's
a
like,
drive worthy of a story unto itself.
Yes.
yeah, it's a novella. So the drive was a novella.
I think with the way Notre Dame has struggled at times with opponents running up the middle, I think all 3 of them are challenging. If Pace and Brown get running a little bit, we've seen it with other teams. Those 2 guys are certainly capable of having some running success. We know Army does because that's what they do, and Woody Marks is really good. So I think they're all a threat.
Yeah, I think it's just worth keeping some context here of like Notre Dame plays to stop the pass first.
Sure.
And they do a hell of a job of that. So they're willing to give up a few gash runs, and then you end up scoring 7 points in the game.
I mean, I totally agree with that, Pete, but it's not like there's nobody in the box to defend the run. I mean, they still get gashed when they shouldn't get gashed sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're fine being gashed when they shouldn't get gashed, opposed being hit with an explosive when they shouldn't be hit with an explosive, right?
No doubt about that.
You just
No doubt
it's
about
a
that.
trade they'll make.
Yep.
I think it's Army is. I don't think I answered. I apologize. I think Army is the toughest left, but I still, how many players on the Army roster could start for Notre Dame? How many players on the USC roster could start for Notre Dame? So I think USC, I'll know more after I see the Trojans against Nebraska. They're making a quarterback change. They haven't played for 2 weeks. Does that quarterback change spark them, or are they completely folded in? Are they done? They're 1 more loss away from a 6-loss season. We're documented that they're a 500 team. They still have some talent. So that's kind of the way I look at that question.
All right, Tio, we're going to move on to a question from Kaiser Wilhelm, and did he contact you directly, or
No,
was
it's on
this
our board. It's on our board.
Okay, no,
It's
I
right
know
in
it was on the board, but you're so he wanted you to. Was this just a senior class, or this is everybody?
I'm using everybody.
Okay, everybody. Okay, so he wanted. There's a series of criteria here.
It's like a yearbook awards, best dressed, class clown, all that kind of
Right,
stuff.
right,
It's a
right.
yearbook
Okay,
award.
best and everybody chime in, of course. Best dressed on the Notre Dame team.
We struggle with this
Players,
one, but we're all defaulting
players.
to Jordan Clark because his dad's well dressed. Anybody else gonna go?
Ryan-
Else have
He has a
candidate?
point of view on his style, so I think that
Ryan
that's-
Clark has
you
style,
gotta
man.
respect
He's got a
that.
whole bunch of style.
Not saying his style would be my style, but it's a point of view on the style.
I might, Trey Reader earlier this year, I saw Matt Cashore's fabulous photos. Trey Reader rocked the hell out of a cowboy hat. That was strong. So, the Trey Reader swag, and then it's a shame to go with anyone other than Marcus Freeman, not a player, but he always has the best drip from our good friend Gawain.
Uh, we were talking to Donovan Heinisch the other day, and if Kurt was still around, they would
Yeah.
class clown would go to Kurt, but he's not there, and Donovan doesn't have the same Donnie doesn't
No.
have the same personality. So who would get class clown on this
I
team?
tried to remember the old interviews, and I think Anthony Knapp could be in there.
Okay. I don't know that
Gregarious.
anybody really jumps out.
Yeah, there's no Lewis Nix. There's no Kurt
No,
Heinrich.
yeah,
Yeah.
no Lou Nix or Kurt Heinisch.
I don't know. Like they were saying that downstairs, somebody asked Donovan Heinisch this week about who he modeled his game after, if he had any favorite players, and he was like, "Well, this Kurt Heinisch guy, I met him a couple of times, so it's a recency bias, but I'm going with Donnie Heinisch."
Okay.
Yeah, I figured if he's just half the class clown of Kurt, then he would still probably win this award as far as Notre Dame goes.
It's time to tell the Kurt Heinrich story that takes 10 seconds. I promise, Jack Freeman. When Cade Madden was moving in with Heinrich and Myron, and I assume some other veteran lineman for the summer, and Madden walked in, and only Kurt Heinrich was there. Or no, I'm sorry, Kurt Heinrich walked in, and Madden was sitting in his chair. And Heinrich just walked in and goes, "That's Big Dog's chair, dude." He popped out of the chair. I'm like, that wasn't a great start, but Cade Madden was actually a very nice guy to talk to. He just had better.
Okay,
Comeback story, Tim Priester. What do you think? You can do this
best
one.
comeback story. No, that's you.
I have Coogan and Spindler, just living proof right now.
Gabriel Rubio for me. I don't think it's too terribly close from what that guy's been through over the last year to how suddenly vital he is right now.
Riley Leonard's leg fell off last year, and now he's Notre Dame's starting quarterback, so I'm going to go with Riley Leonard.
Well, I am partial to Coogan because and what a soldier he's been, no doubt, and Spindler as well. I mean, you can imagine guys that are combined for 23 starts last year, and getting set down for Schroff is understandable,
Right.
But
and-
Pendleton's like
yeah,
maybe a little
that's
bit more
tough.
of a eyebrow raiser. So good for those guys. MVP?
Right now, it's Riley Leonard now.
Yeah.
In my voting, one player can win more than one award, unlike some other year-end awards at Notre Dame. So I'm going to go with Riley Leonard here too.
That was actually why I did not give him.
Oh,
the comeback
you were
story.
following the rules.
I'm following the rules. Yes.
Okay.
JB, you got somebody other than that?
Oh, I said Leonard. No, because
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Jeremiah Love? No, not enough numbers. Most
Xavier Watts is the only other guy you could throw out there, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. Most likely to succeed.
I'm going with two guys. Breaking rules. Jaden Thomas, because apparently he was in the stock market when he was a redshirt freshman, according to Braden Lindsay, and he's talked about it again. And Devin Ford, because obviously he's the number one team player of all team players. He will go succeed somewhere.
Jack Kaiser gets my vote.
Yeah.
He finished first in his class in his accounting program, not first among Notre Dame football players, first among all students. So I'm going to go Jack Kaiser here.
Yeah, I'm going Jack Kaiser. What's he have? 4 Notre Dame degrees now or something? Like I've got some friends who are double domers, but this guy's like a quad domer or close to it. So I'll cheat and take Kaiser, although I just had somebody else right. Oh, I was going to say a close runner-up would be Pat Coogan, just for the resiliency and grit we've seen from him, and it still resonates with me how Joe Rudolph really stood on the table for Pat Coogan right before the start of the season, knowing at that point in time that Coogan wasn't going to be a starter. Joe Rudolph has been around and put a bunch of dudes in the league, and he couldn't say enough good things about Pat Coogan being a natural leader of men.
Yeah, I'd go. Well, I think all you guys have good picks, but I'd have to go. Pete's stat on Kaiser's
Yes.
a little bit hard to argue
Hey,
with.
Pete, do you think Jack Kaiser is successful because of those summer study halls he had to go to? Sorry, inside joke that people may or may not know.
Yeah.
Most
I think I
likely
could
to
put him over the top.
most likely to run for office?
I went with Cam Williams.
Ooh, that's a good call.
I'll probably go Benjamin Morrison.
Yeah. No, I'm going. Well, no, we can't double up because I was about to say Riley Leonard. Come on, that guy looks like he's straight out of Central Casting to run for something. And if Tommy Tuberville can be an Alabama senator,
I was gonna say Alabama's.
then what couldn't Riley Leonard do?
What? Yeah, I mean, what are the political offices available in Australia for James Rundell? I'm not familiar.
Yeah.
All right, this is a tough one. Most likely to win a Grammy.
Devin Houston. He's an accomplished dancer.
Okay. Okay.
I cede my time to O'Malley on that one.
I remember that's when I remember when I interviewed Devin Houston. I did not know that story, unlike some of the recruiting reporters that were doing it, and I was shocked to hear he's a very accomplished dancer. That's what kind of got him into sports.
I'm going retroactive with my pick, and I'm taking Audric Estime just because it was so fun to hear all of his teammates make fun of Audric singing. And so I don't want Audric to give up on his dreams. And I know an increased workload for the Broncos, but I'm going with the retroactive pick because I would have asked to make this pick a year ago. Audric
Estime, the singer, is like Penn State going there for a college football playoff.
Yeah. Well, but he's got a good fallback career going. So most likely to end up on a future Notre Dame coaching staff.
All right, I went Jaden Osbury.
Ooh, I like that one.
Remember his favorite position was Mike, but also Rover, but also weak side linebacker when we interviewed him the first time. So I think he just likes football.
Yeah, he adapted all of them pretty quickly.
You know, I mean, look, if playing football doesn't work out for CJ Carr, I could see him easily being a coach down the road.
Yeah, maybe a Steve Angeli. I think
Yeah, that was my second choice. That was my second pick.
I think he's got that. I was trying to think about the secondary too. Maybe a Rod Hurd. Steve Angeli. That's kind of where I'm going.
And then wrapping up with most likely to subscribe to Irish Illustrated and meltdown when Notre Dame is tied with a lesser opponent at halftime.
Jordan Botello.
I think I would actually give a vote to Howard Cross because I feel like he will be very quickly into fan mode when he's done playing at Notre Dame.
I see that too. I think
What about
CJ
Robert
Carr will be
Quinn?
so tied to this place after 2 national championships as a sophomore and junior that he will really be upset 10 years later coming back to campus when they're not up to snuff at quarterback.
You told me you were going to pick Deuce Knight, O'Malley. I'm stunned.
All right, T.O., you move on to the next
Jay
question.
Marasco, can you say a few words about the passing of Jerry Faust? I would like to hear about your interactions with him over the years.
Well, I'm obviously the only old guy here, old enough to, it's, I mean, there's just absolutely no denying that the guy was 800% Catholic. I mean, as much as anybody that you could possibly imagine. Obviously, I mean, my perspective, I was one of 8 people in the room when he surprised the entire nation by saying that his last game was going to be coming up at Miami. Now, he told me last June that he was given the option for a 6th year. Now, I'm not sure that I've heard that from anybody else.
Wow. And
I'm not sure that that's totally true, but that was his perspective on it. But Jerry was we had an interesting relationship because he was not a big fan of mine as a young, cocky, spunky sports writer just out of school.
So obvious. Sorry.
Well, no, go ahead, JB. Throw something in there.
No, I do have something pertinent, obviously not from me on Jerry Faust, but had someone text this to me who had previously worked in the Notre Dame football recruiting office and does not now. So I'm just going to read it and share it. And he said, back when I was a student working in the football office, I answered the phone. It was Coach Faust. He asked if he could speak to Coach Davey, and I knew Coach was in a meeting. So I said, can I take a message? And he then took the time to ask me my name, where I was from, what dorm I lived in, what my major was. He was so kind, and that really had an impact on me. In the 3+ years I worked in the football office, Coach Davey never said anything more than "Hey" to me. R.I.P. Coach Faust.
Well, that was Jerry. Jerry was at my wedding. So my wife worked for Jerry. So again, my perspective on
He
all
apparently
this
liked her more than the spunky reporter.
That's exactly right. And it's all very complex. But the other part of the equation was he had to coach Notre Dame football for 5 years. And he never, I mean, Notre Dame should never have done that to him. He was not equipped to do that on a lot of levels. And then the other thing was, um, his mellow-props were incredible. He was talking about somebody that could throw with both hands, and he said that he was amphibious as opposed to ambidextrous. So he was he was a hoot. There's a bunch of stories out there, and in fact, I would encourage Irish Illustrated subscribers to check out a retrospective that I'm going to have tomorrow on Friday, November 15th, and it's out of respect, I wanted to wait a little bit because the other part of the equation was that he was a guy that was put in a position that was not prepared to be the head football coach at Notre Dame. He was following Eric Parsegian and Dan Devine, which is just, Devine wasn't necessarily revered and loved by Notre Dame fans, but he did win a national title and Parsegian won too. So,
And he has a statue. So
and he has a statue.
I do have a letter from Jerry Faust to my sister who worked in the office with Faust. She wrote a letter to the Observer kind of commending him as a person when he was fired because people were obviously rejoicing that he was fired as a poor college football coach. He saw the letter. Now you imagine, you say Bob Davie didn't have too many conversations. You imagine someone seeing a letter in the Observer and writing that person a letter back, thanking them for kind words. That's what Jerry Faust did to my sister and hand signed it. I mean, I put it on the board anyway, but we could instead of reading the whole letter, it is on the Irish Illustrated message board.
Well, that's cool. And last
It made
thing
an impact on a lot of people.
Since Priester made the amphibious joke, the late great John Ward, former voice of the Vols, Tennessee played Washington State in the 80s, and I don't remember the game, but Washington State had a quarterback who could throw left or right-handed, and his name was Samoa, and he dropped back to pass, and John Ward said, he's amphibious, So on the broadcast, live on the broadcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, as I said at the end of today's Thursday Thoughts, Jerry's in the only end zone that truly matters now. I'm quite confident that he went to the resting place that he always wanted to be in. So God bless Jerry Faust.
From Mr. Stuller, what should our realistic rooting interest be in other games this weekend?
JB?
Yeah, I already sort of prefaced that.
Yeah, we talked a lot about this on Wednesday, and again, for Irish Illustrated subscribers, Drew Mentok every Saturday moving forward here to the end of the season will have. He had a story last week prior to last week's game against Florida State, and we'll do so. But JB, your perspective on that?
Yeah, I just think as I've noted that you want the ACC and the Big 12 to continue to look like one bid leagues. I think at most they would collectively get two bids right now. You want Georgia to lose. You don't want 5-10-2 SEC teams. You just don't want to have that sweat coming. I'm not saying it would definitely squeeze Notre Dame, but you just don't want to give any room for that squeeze to potentially take place. So I think you want to see Georgia pick up a third loss. Missouri's not going to make the playoffs, but I think they'll go ahead and get a third loss this weekend against South Carolina. BYU or Colorado, I think at this point are the classes of the Big 12. But if BYU picks up a loss before then and you only have the Big 12 champion to worry about getting a bid, I think that's good. I wrote about this today on Football Scoop. The same scenario, you want Georgia eliminated because right now you really are looking at the possibility of 4 SEC teams, 4 Big 10 teams as it stands. Then you get an ACC team, a Big 12 team, a Group of 5 team, and that leaves a spot for Notre Dame. And so when you watch, and I will give a shameless plug, it's up on Football Scoop right now. It's the lead story. It's the Football Scoop Weekend Primer. I outlay it a little bit more clearly there and explain the ramifications of multiple games. But to me, yeah, if you're looking to surf the noon games and the 7 o'clock games before and after the Irish take care of Virginia, that's the viewpoint that you want.
We have a question from NYC Leprechaun. What's the ceiling on Leonard Moore and Christian Gray at this point in their early careers? Equal to or greater than Benjamin Morrison? I ask because any run in the playoffs is going to come against receivers the likes we have not seen yet this season at Ohio State, Ole Miss, Oregon, Texas, Miami, Georgia, UT, etc.
Well, the question, the ceiling for these guys could be very high, but that is not going to help you against Ohio State, Ole Miss, Oregon, Texas, Miami, Georgia, et cetera, this year. And by the end of Benjamin Morrison's freshman year, he had gone against Ohio State with Marvin Harrison and Emeka Buka and the guy
Jackson Smith and Jigba.
yeah, the guy played for the Seahawks for for the first quarter. And then he had tested late too against USC when it was fully functional with Caleb Williams. So we just don't know about Leonard Moore and Christian Gray to that certain. I mean, it's like Priester, you could probably speak to this better. Like, who are the best receivers that Moore and Gray have faced this year?
Colin Lacey, and he jumped up and made
Yeah,
the
and
catch.
he stepped aside because he was so good. He wanted to. I'm not exactly sure what his intentions are, but yeah.
Come to Notre Dame, I think. There is no Markinson. He's on his way. That's fine.
I think like I hate to. Immediately say, well, somebody's going to be better than Benjamin Morrison because without the injury, he's clearly a first-round pick, and he still possibly could be. But I think Leonard Moore's ceiling is really high. I don't think Christian Gray's is as high because he's not as long as Leonard Moore, but and he's probably not as long as Ben Morrison either. But
I think Christian Gray's a little longer than Ben Morrison in talking to different people on campus. I think they're listed at the same height, but Christian Gray has longer arms and a bit more physicality to him. So just jumping in here between the Kyle Hamilton draft, and now he's the best safety in all of the NFL. You've got X Watts getting ready to be in the draft. I still think Ben Morrison, be hard for him to be a first rounder. I still think he's a top 50 pick in all likelihood in the upcoming draft. And then there's belief on campus that Christian Gray and then Moore follow in behind that as first round picks. So I think that over the next 3 years, you'll see Notre Dame have a chance to stake a claim as a 2020s DBU.
It's interesting because a lot of times people on the outside are like, well, like what all 6'1" guys, how can one be longer than the other? But a lot of times these guys will come into interviews, and you're right, Christian Gray has that to him too, where like their torso's longer. They just, I don't know if I really know how to fully explain it, but regardless of the height, it's like they're taller than they really are. Arm length certainly is a huge part of it.
Yeah,
I think it's the. Go ahead, JB.
I was just going to say real quickly, through the years, like getting to know and covering Jalen Ramsey and Lamarcus Joyner along the way, those guys had preternaturally long arms. Like one of them, I think, could put his arms at his side and they almost touched his kneecaps. It was insane, the wingspan that he had on an otherwise like 6 foot frame.
And that was one of the things that Leonard Moore, that was really, really obvious about him on his high school film, that his arms were just longer than most guys, his actual length.
I think it's important to note that we are looking at this not in a tragic viewpoint like we would have been if Jaden Mickey and Clarence Lewis and in the past they had to replace somebody. Of course, it's going to be harder to play those guys without Benjamin Morrison, but you have Leonard Moore and Christian Gray, and they can saddle up and try it. There's no Tay Martin from Oklahoma State just going to jump over the corner and make every play in a bowl game like they did against Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. They can survive because of these guys. It's incredible that they're fourth corner, who was better than the third corner, but their fourth corner is actually a guy you're not worried about that much until you run into the best receivers in the country. You worry about Benjamin Morrison against the best receivers in the country too.
Right, exactly. And these guys also play on a defense that's number one in the country in completion percentage against them, and that all ties into it with what Al Golden's doing with this defense. Question from as in THEEE. Is it wrong to cheer for a big Chris Tyree home run and an eventual 45-14 blowout? We really haven't talked much about Chris Tyree, the former Notre Dame player with Virginia. He's been banged up. He hasn't had a real noteworthy season for them. But would you give up a long touchdown run for Chris Tyree on senior day for Notre Dame?
He could score both touchdowns in a 52-14 game. That'd be fun too.
Yeah, I feel like of the guys who have left, Chris Tyree's probably one of, if not the most like popular, for lack of a better term.
He was
Like,
mature when he was a freshman.
Oh,
yeah, it was kind
absolutely.
of like I went down to Virginia when he was in high school, spent some time with his family, just really liked them. They were easy to get along with and insightful. And I felt like he was pretty introspective interview when he was here too, which we all appreciate because it means you're listening to the question that you're asked and trying to answer it. And yeah, I think as he departed, it was good luck to you opposed to good riddance. And I think that him coming back and having success, that would, but I think he will be a guy after the game that a lot of teammates go find.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A real easy young guy for us in the media to respect.
I think he's a guy that a lot of coaches would go find, and a lot of media members would like to say hi to on the way out too. That's
Right.
I think nowadays most players embrace guys leaving for whatever reason they leave. They'd go find everybody else that left last year too. But I think everybody involved in the program would like to say hi to Chris Tyree after the game.
Yeah, ton of respect for that dude. So I like I like where these sentiment is.
All right, last question before we go to predictions for the game. Club Fred 90 asks for another prediction. Will Saturday's Virginia game be the last home game that Notre Dame plays this season?
I will say no.
No.
I'll say no as well.
It's unanimous.
Mathematically speaking, it probably is because they could still lose a game and that would ruin it. But I'll say no.
So they're going 11-1. That last one's going to be tough, man. That's no gimme. JB,
No, it's not. I know.
JB, your sentiment all along the way has been that they may not want to play, and I certainly respect that. But I also have a lifetime of
They cover, man.
trips to the Coliseum going against them and records and
No, I know. That's
sentiment,
why I say this weekend is critical. I mean, they're at 5 losses. They've already had 2 significant players voluntarily step aside for the remainder of the year. Do they have more guys by the last week of November after Thanksgiving decide this crap's not worth it anymore?
Yeah, well, that's a key. Guys opting out that that wasn't
It's
a
interesting
factor
because they have
before.
UCLA and Notre Dame, Tim, and that's a huge deal too for those
Yeah.
fans.
Yeah. Predictions, fellas. Here we go.
The senior day thing is dead and buried at this point. I think they'll be fine. Notre Dame's playing really well. That will carry into this weekend. So I got them 35-14 over Virginia.
I think I actually filed my prediction early because otherwise O'Malley yells at me and calls and wakes me up.
Over text. I yell over text.
Yeah, but you've got this obnoxious text. I got 38-10 Irish.
Yeah, I too believe the senior day thing is dead. And part of the reason I think the senior day thing existed for Lou Holtz and his much better Notre Dame teams, not necessarily much better than this one, but much better than the teams that have been winning so easily on senior day, is because here's who they played on senior day when Lou Holtz was there. Number 3 in the country. That's tough on senior day, right? 1986. Number 5 in the country the next year. Penn State, number 21. 1989. We're still going here, by the way, before they ever lose one. 1989, you get to number 9 in the country. Losing to Stanford, losing to Tennessee, number 7 in the country, losing to BC, number 16 in the country. Notre Dame is now playing Wake Forest, Virginia, and Boston College, and not the type of Boston College that beat Notre Dame either. So I think that's what senior day was under Lou Holtz. They used to play absolutely murderous, horrible schedules that would get people beaten. I think Notre Dame is going to handle Virginia. I think we'll probably see Bill Walsh return to the sidelines for one magical drive early to coordinate this offense yet again, because I don't understand it. But someone goes up and down the field to start the game against Notre Dame, then it's lights out. I have Notre Dame 42-10.
Holtz is playing like 4 top 10 teams in a season.
The worst team he played was Penn State a year after the title. Jeez.
No doubt. Obviously, I'll have my prediction in the Irish Illustrated preview on Friday. I want to remind everybody that yesterday, we recorded a Irish Illustrated Insider with O'Malley, Bryce, and myself talking about the college football playoffs. We'll be doing that again next Wednesday, and then the Wednesday of Thanksgiving week. Obviously, we're going to combine. I might even travel on Thanksgiving. We'll combine our podcast on that Wednesday. So until then, obviously, we will be getting together with you pregame with our pregame incident analysis. Until then, this has been Tim Priester, Tim O'Malley, John Bryce, and Pete Sampson, and this is Irish Illustrated Insider.